7 wins and no losses. Undefeated.
So you've all seen some short clips of on some findings. Some realistic, like boxing. There are games that are abstract, like chess. Some are visual, and some are very visceral. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sony and I will be defending my dissertation today. I am also known as Mr. Valdez from other parts of the world. My title, my dissertation title is Yomi Artificial Intelligence. Jack and Boy, rock, paper, scissors, and Rosami. They all basically means the same. One game, and very easy to learn. There are 3 possible moves: rock, paper, and scissors. So paper beats covers rock, rock destroys scissors, and scissors cut paper. Now let's go to Yomi. Yomi is the Japanese word meaning to read, as in to read your opponent's mind. It is used in competitive games. I myself is very familiar with the concept of Yomi. Yeah, so I use Yomi in my competitive game. The term Yomi was popularized by the game designer and author David Sony. He used to be a Street Fighter 2 champion. Street Fighter is a visual game in which 2 players fight until one is knocked out. Let's use an example. Here is a Simpsons episode. I can't remember the name of the episode. But here, Lisa and Bart are trying to play rock, paper, scissors. Lisa thinks cool, unbeatable Bart always uses rock. Bart thinks good old rock, you can never lose with rock. Lisa then plays paper. Bart plays his favorite rock. This is the concept of Yomi. Bart has a strategy, and that is to play rock, his favorite move. We call that Yomi layer 0, or the strategy layer. Lisa has predicted her opponent and played to beat Bart's strategy. That is Yomi layer 1. Yomi layer 1 basically beats the lower layer. A higher layer beats a lower layer. Bart knows his system. He knows that Lisa knows what move he's going to play. So Bart uses the move that beats Lisa's condition, which is Bart layer 1, scissor. But Lisa knows that Bart knows that Lisa knows that Bart knows that he's going to play scissors. So Lisa, being very smart, plays at a higher Yomi layer, which is layer 2, which beats Bart's layer 1. Remember, the higher layer beats the lower layer. Bart knows, Lisa knows that Bart knows that Lisa knows that Bart knows he's going to play scissors. So we go to another layer, which is layer 2. Lisa, of course, plays a higher layer. This is layer 3, scissors. This might look weird, and to some casual players, this never happens. But as a competitive player, I know it happens. There are some terms, for example, one player that I know who does the move before the opponent even thinks he's going to do that move. And he's known as a psychic player. Pacquiao is one of them, who plays at a very high layer. Take note that there is no layer 4 for the defender, for the predictor, and there is no layer 3 for the strategist, because layer 3 is the same as layer 0. Lisa's layer 4 is the same as layer 1. In other genres, the concept of Yomi is also used in other genres, not just in competitive games. Here we have the tactical wheel from fencing. If you're trying to do a simple attack, you can be defeated by a counter attack. So you're going to try to move backward and go for parry and response to defeat the counter attack. It's a tactical wheel. Same with boxing, we have counter jabs and flats. Now, why did I use Rosambo for my testing, to test my artificial intelligence? I am a firm believer of open source and open research. The only available open source artificial intelligence testing platform is the first international Rosambo programming competition by Dark Builds from 2000. They have open source. They have open source all of the high-ranking AIs that played in the first international Rosambo. So, the Rosambo tournament by Dark Builds uses two ranking systems to tell how well an AI performs: the match results and the tournament results. Basically, the tournament results that states all of the number of turns that an AI has won. So if the AI has won 1,000 turns, its score would be 1,000. For the match result, we see the difference. If the difference is over 50, the AI takes 2 points. If it's less than 50, less than negative 50, meaning it lost, it takes 0 points. And finally, everything in between is a tie for 1 point. So, earlier in the Lisa and Bart's example, we had Lisa try to predict her opponent. In Yomi, it is important to have a predictor to try to predict your opponent. I didn't have a predictor when I started this AI. So, me and my friends built 2 predictors. Soon to be Dr. Henner and me and Dr. Jan, we published we published a modified bit frequency algorithm. So basically, this predictor will try to predict your opponent by the number of moves that they play. So let's say the opponent has played rock 100% of the time. This would return rock as the prediction. The N says when the modified bit frequency would try to recompute the probabilities. So if we put in 1, it means that every turn it will try to reset, try to recompute the prediction probability. For 2, it basically means for every 2 turns, it will try to do. For the historical base sequence predictor, we have soon to be Dr. DJ, and we use a window size. Basically, a historical base sequence predictor would try to find patterns inside the history of the opponent's move. So if window size is 3, and the opponent plays rock, paper, scissors, rock, paper, scissors, rock, paper, scissors, it will try to look for rock, paper, scissors, the 3 pattern window size. Prior to 2012, people keep using the term metagaming. But the problem is, metagaming, as described by different researchers, means different things. Carter developed a new vocabulary for metagaming and basically categorized it into 3. The autogaming, metagaming, and paragaming. And this is why this is my favorite research paper that I reference. Autogaming basically refers to just the rules. No more. Just the rule of the game. Metagaming means you take information from outside the game and apply it in your game. For example, in autogaming in Rosambo, the best move is to play at random. While in metagaming, you try to predict your opponent. Or rather, you know your opponent will play rock. This is the overview of the Yoni AI. This is the entire program. We have a problem analysis and a decision making. The game state is basically all of the history, all of the moves that has been played by the opponent. Different games, of course, uses different game states. We have more than 1 predictors. I mentioned earlier that I have a historical sequence predictor and a big frequency big predictor. Both of those predictors can be modified to have different behavior. So we can have more than one version of each predictor as part of the predictor. So SSP WS equal 2 is one predictor, WS equal 3 is another predictor. In a game, there will be more than 1 strategies. So we also take more than 1 strategy as an input from the problem analysis. The strategy we employed in our tournament, in our AI, is simple: play at random. So while in the image there's more than 1 strategy, in practice, in the actual artificial intelligence, I am only using 1 strategy. We also have ranking subsystem. This is basically a formula or a code that tries to rank all of the predictors and find out which predictor is the more likely to be used. Same with the strategy. Each predictor would give a confidence level. How confident is the predictor that rock will be played? How confident is the predictor that paper will be played? The predictor selector basically takes all of the predictors, apply it to the ranking subsystem, and return just 1 predictor. Same with the strategy selector. These 2, the Yomi play and the strategy play, would be decided by the final decider to figure out if he's going to play if the AI is going to play Yomi or strategy. Let's zoom in into the Yomi layer. So that these are the three important variables of Yomi play, or rather the Yomi layer selector. The preferences, the score preferences, and the score preferences weight. To tell everyone the truth, I'm not really satisfied with the video. We can change it later. That's what the panel is for anyway. To change everything in my system. So, different players have different Yomi preferences. So, one player might go from Yomi layer 1 to layer 3. And when they are under Yomi layer 2, they use Yomi layer 2 on the last turn, they might go back to Yomi layer 2 again. Or they could go back to layer 1. These values are an estimate on how I use Yomi. It's just an estimate. It's not perfect, but it's close enough. For example, personally, I don't go from layer 1 to layer 3 at all. And there's only a small chance that I will move from layer 1 to layer 2. I apply this as a Markov chain. So the first row is for layer 1, second row is for layer 2 and layer 3. Whatever the predictor returns, whatever its confidence level, it is multiplied with each of these matrices, or rather each of these volumes in the matrix. The Yomi score preferences variable. I need to put this in so that over time the AI would react to the Yomi layer of its opponent. I will give an example later. But first, these are the variables. Each layer has a variable for wins if it was played. For example, if on turn 5, we would have 1 if we played layer 2. But in that turn, we played layer 1. So layer 2 would have a value of 1, because it would have 1 if that was played. It is divided by 1000, sorted from highest to lowest, and for each sorted index, multiplied by the score preferences. For example, here, layer 1 would have 1 520 times, layer 2 would have 1 120 times, and layer 3 would have 1 time. If we sort this, you would get this order. Doing the mathematics, we will add 52% to layer 1, to all rows in layer 1. 7%. So this is supposed to be 0.7. This is supposed to be 0.7%. And this, for layer 3, very low chances of using this. This is basically the same, and we just change the ranking. Finally, we have the Yomi score preferences rate. Basically, this variable would define how big the influence of the Yomi score preferences is to the entire system. If we set it to 1.0, it means that it has a very high preference. I seem to have lost that word.
Probably.
No, Bollard.
Bias.
Bias. Yeah, that's it. Bias. So the way it basically is to do bias, or rather discrete bias, to the Yomi is called preferences. Finally, we normalize the matrix by row. So this is equal to 1, and this is totals to 1, and this totals to 1. I am unsure how to write it down on the dissertation. So if you think that I use the wrong mathematics for this, please tell me. So we need to find out, we need to develop a training program to try to find the best version of Yomi AI. And these are the different parameters for the system. The strategy to use, the different strategy ranking, the predictors, the preferences score, preferences, and score weight. Okay, so this is basically an example of the parameters that I showed earlier. We have the strategies, what ranking it's going to use, and the different predictors. Here, this version of Yomi uses the pattern predictor 1 to 29 and the frequent peak predictor from 1 to 2. And here are its Yomi preferences and Yomi score preferences. By the way, if you've noticed, my paper, my research and analysis has two parts. The first part is for auto gaming, and the second part is for meta gaming. I will explain meta gaming later. But everything that I said just now refers to the auto gaming. And here are the results. For a random strategy, it's out of 42 different AIs, the random strategy is somewhere in the middle, which makes sense because random strategies in Rosambo would not give you a high ranking or a low ranking. It's just out of this. I separated the Yomi to use different parts of the system. For example, here, we are just going to use the rock-only predictor with no score influence. It performed badly, worse than random strategy. This shows that the strength of Yomi depends entirely on how good the prediction is. Going back to the example earlier, if this is a printed paper, no matter how good their Yomi is, no matter how deep they go, since the prediction is wrong, they will not get, Lisa would not be able to get the win. I also have two different ranking systems, which is the Wilson lower bound and the Wilson upper bound. This code, or rather this result, shows the effect of both ranking. So the complete Yomi for auto gaming has a rank of 8 out of 42 AIs. And for tournament, 13 out of 42. it's basically on the average side. To accomplish better gaming, I basically created a genetic algorithm training program which takes all the different Yomi version and then mutate each variable, given a small chance to mutate, add more predictors to change to something completely different and more. Basically, it's using the ranking system as its fitness function. Also, I've used Mercenary RNG because this is a meta gaming. I'm trying to isolate the AI as much as possible from the other 40 AIs. Because we're trying to play outside the box or meta the tournament. This is an example of the genetic algorithm output. So we have strand material heavy. Here we can see that this version did not use pattern predictor 1, did not use pattern predictor 7, and so on. For debugging purposes, I put him here where it will, who his parents are. So I left this running, the genetic algorithm, for over a month, and I've done more than 1 gigabyte of data, of outputs. On the dissertation that I submitted last week, I basically put in whatever version, what's the best variant that I found last week. Which are these 4, which has very high ranking of 3. So these AI versions are at the top 3. But since I submitted my dissertation, I just left the genetic algorithm running, and just this morning I got a rank of 2. So my AI, Mr. Victor Morbitz, has a ranking of, he's in the top 2. And this is his information, his data. I've noticed that it tries to give a big bias to the weakest Yomi layer over here. Remember, this is normalized. So even if it went past 1.0, it will be normalized.
What mutations did you allow for your genetic algorithm?
Sorry?
What mutations did you allow? Insertions, deletions,
Just a, what's this?
splicing.
Splicing, I believe.
Did you control the point of splice? Or is all random?
It's random. I have the code.
It's called crossover.
Crossover.
Crossover in this line.
Okay, ginamit niya.
Mutation. What did you do?
Just a genetic
Programming tool or program from scratch?
program from scratch.
Full control.
So this is the mutation, and 1% to change the predictor, 0.5 chance to change the random strategy from scratch.
Can control everything.
And uniform from the university.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Alright. So those are the results. Future technologies. This email is one of my favorite emails that I received. I emailed David Serdin, and then I asked him if if there are any papers that references his work on yogi. He basically said there is I'm not really aware of any paper that references yogi. And even in my research, I did not find any paper that talks about yogi. So this is